Today I'm flying British Airways First Class in the cheapest way possible on their cheapest route. I'll show you what the experience is like from the spacious seat to the onboard food and drink, and what it's like in BA's exclusive Concorde Room lounge. And of course, I'll show you exactly how you can book this for significantly less than you may think. But for now, let's get over to the airport. Now, you might be able to tell from the surroundings here that I'm not departing from Heathrow today, so why did I say in the intro that I'll be heading to the Concorde Room? Well, I'm flying to Heathrow today, where I have an onwards connecting flight up to Newcastle in business class, and when you land in first class and have an onwards connection on the same ticket, BA allows you to access the Concorde Room, so I'll be heading there after we land today's flight. So for that reason, I'll not spend too much time on the lounge at this airport, which is the King Abdulaziz International Airport here in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Now, the check-in experience was a little bit off here. As usual with BA check-in, you had your separate lines for economy, business, first class, and I made my way over to the first class queue. Now, when I got there was someone stood in front of the business class queue being seen to, and there was a child that was in front of the first class queue who was talking to the person behind the desk. But other than that, the guy behind the desk was just kind of staring at his screen, and this child kept coming back and forth to the desk every now and then. So it seemed like the guy at the first class desk was maybe helping them out, but he just didn't look up from his computer at all. And after about 10 minutes of waiting at the end of this queue, with the guy not looking up at all, not acknowledging me, I finally just approached and asked, "Are you assisting someone else at the moment? Are you able to check me in?" Turns out he was free to assist me, checked me in no time. So once I was finally at the desk, it was very efficient, no conversation at all and no mention of a lounge though. I then went through fast track immigration and security, which was also a bit of a strange one. It had 0 other passengers, and based on how the staff were acting, it almost seemed like I may have been their first passenger of the day, or that they generally just didn't expect to see any passengers coming through. It was quite early in the day though, to be fair, around 6 AM at this point, so maybe everyone's just a bit tired and hadn't quite got up and running for the day yet. As the check-in agent had given no information about the lounge, I had a quick search in the One World website to see what would be available to me, and that told me the Aerotel Lobby Lounge and the Plaza Premium Lounge would be available to me. I saw the Aerotel as soon as I'd arrived in departure, so I just went straight in there. It's a nice grand space with comfy seats. The buffet was a bit limited, but chicken sausage, potato wedges and falafel would be my first breakfast of the day. This was eaten with plastic cutlery, juice from a plastic cup. Not exactly screaming first class, but hopefully BA will deliver better than this, both in the air and in Heathrow. I left the lounge in decent time as the gate was a fair walk away, and I wanted to ensure I could be one of the first on board, both to maximise time in the first class seat, but also to get some footage of the cabin before everyone else got on board. There were some additional security checks at the gate, so my bag was checked, but I was through just in time to start the pre-boarding. It's quite amusing how every time someone was allowed to go through the pre-boarding, you get a massive group rushing up to the gate to try and be let in as well, only to all get turned away, and the same people kept trying again and again. I think they weren't quite getting that this was boarding for people who needed assistance. Eventually though, we were all called to board. Groups 1 to 4 were all called at the same time, no priority given to Group 1 or First Class. But thanks to some quick reactions, I did manage to get up to the front of the queue, allowing me to be first on board after those that were pre-boarded. And arriving on board, I turned left and was escorted over to my seat, which today is seat 1A. The cabin is set out in a 1-2-1 configuration over just 2 rows, with these seats in the middle being the best ones for having conversations, although the seats are still a bit of a distance apart. I flew in BA First Class for the first time a few months ago, and I noticed straight away that this seat was a slightly different layout to that one. So let's have a proper look around. Over to my left there's a great sized side table with a lamp, and at the end of the seat we have a good sized in-flight entertainment screen. The seat itself is very comfortable and it's got 2 pillows waiting for me. Down to the left there's this storage compartment here, quite a good size, and already more storage than the previous iteration of the seat that I sat in. And then there's further storage in this compartment here. Seat controls are at the side over by the lamp. This dial here controls both the seat recline and also the brightness of the lamp. There's a footrest at the end of the seat, and you can also adjust that to pull it closer towards you. However, unlike in the previous version of First Class I sat in, there's no option for buddy dining here. Last time I travelled with my partner Kelly and we were able to sit in the same seat to enjoy a drink and also a meal. And then over to the side, underneath this blanket and earphones that was provided, there's another storage compartment. This one's a really deep one, it was great for throwing some of those things in, like the blanket. And then there's even more storage in the form of this small hanging space. So if you dressed a bit smarter than me and you had a jacket to hang up, you could put it in there. I did think at first this blanket might be the only bedding they'd provide, but they did provide full bedding later on. The seat's tray table's deployed by this button. It's a good sized tray table, pretty sturdy. Again, I think the previous version of first class I sat in was slightly bigger than this one, which I guess is more necessary in that seat if you were to do the buddy dining. But aside from it having something a little bit sticky on it, it was otherwise fine. A few different charging options available. These are all in that small storage compartment that was over to the left. And there's also the controller for the in-flight entertainment in here. Above the seat were reading lights, but no air vents. And then there's an additional reading light over to the side. I received a really warm welcome from the crew who brought me an amenity kit, the menu for today's flight, pyjamas and slippers. And we'll take a proper look at all of these a little bit later on. I was also offered a welcome drink and some snacks. No champagne available prior to leaving Saudi airspace however, but the orange juice was actually very high quality, so at least that was enjoyable. And given the early flight time, probably for the best there was a slight delay on the alcohol. I started to notice there was quite a bit of dirt left around the seat, particularly under this cubby here. And in addition to this being a bit of an older seat, there were a good few signs of wear and tear around the seat as well. For example, this panel sticking out, and this cubby that wouldn't properly close. So I decided to take a look at the menu to distract myself from that dirt. Given today's 8 AM departure, it's a breakfast menu for the main meal. Breakfast on planes is never the best, and I even decided to break my usual rule about avoiding plane meals that have eggs in them. As I wanted to try out the full English, you'd expect that surely British Airways should be able to get this right in first class, right? Taking a look at the drinks menu, there's some really good champagne and spirit options available for later in the flight, but as mentioned this wouldn't be available until we're out of Saudi airspace. I placed my order and the friendly crew said they'd bring me some champagne the second we were out of that Saudi airspace, and then they brought me a hot towel. And whilst waiting for pushback I decided to have a quick look in the amenity kit. BA do a really good job here, one of the best amenity kits out there. A really good quality eye mask, plenty of Elemis goodies, including moisturiser, lip balm, shaving gel, exfoliator. You also get a first class pen, a dental kit, a comb, and some earplugs. And this all arrives in a nice soft temple-y bag. I then decided to look at BA's High Life entertainment system. As the screen's so far away, you are reliant on the controller that's in this storage area. It's not the most responsive touchpad ever, it wasn't quite reading my touches, which was a bit poor, but eventually after a lot of tapping away, I finally managed to get the map up on screen. And before long we were pushing back pretty much on time as the safety demonstration played. And as we get on our way here, let's talk about the cost of today's flight. How much was it and how can you get it as cheap as possible? Well, I've paid with Avios, but the key thing here is that this is the cheapest Avios route that BA offer first class on, and that's because the difference is a bit of a sweet spot where it's just below the threshold that would trigger a greater number of points to be required. For example, BA currently operates flights to 2 cities in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah and Riyadh, but because Riyadh's a bit further away, the flight there would have cost me an additional 30,000 Avios. So how many Avios did I pay? Just 50,000. But that's with flying during what BA considers peak dates. If you fly on off-peak dates, this flight is just 42,500 Avios, an incredibly low number of points for 7 hours in first class. That doesn't come without its trade-offs. Obviously not everyone will want to travel to Saudi Arabia, and there will be a cost to a visa. But for anyone who wants to try out BA first class but doesn't think they'll ever earn enough points, this is a fantastic route to try. Not just because the points required are so low, but because it also tends to be a route with quite good availability. Now obviously this is just one way, so you'll need points for a return journey, but if you don't have enough points or can't find availability, cash flights with the likes of Saudi Air can be quite cheap on the route. And from Jeddah you could choose to explore Saudi Arabia or just use it as a connecting point to other places in the Middle East or elsewhere. So I've told you how much it cost me in Avios, but there are of course some taxes and charges to pay alongside that, and in my case that was £281.57. That's how much I am out of pocket to fly 7 hours in BA first class, a few hours of food and drink in the Concorde Room, and then a business class flight up to Newcastle. Not bad going, especially considering how cheaply I'm able to acquire these points. But even if you don't acquire Avios very cheaply or don't have enough points, it can still be a great deal. If you were to buy 42,500 Avios using something like Avios Boost, that would cost you around 380 quid. Add that to the taxes and charges, and you're only paying around 660 quid to fly BA first class. That's an absolute bargain. But enough about the cost, let's see what you actually get for that money. Once we were up in the air, I decided to make myself more comfortable, so that meant kicking off my shoes and replacing those with the provided slippers. These are a nice quality and they're in the same style as the Temple Pyjamas, and I decided it would be a good idea to go put those pyjamas on too so I could be properly relaxed. So I made my way over to the bathroom. The bathroom at the front of this 787 is pretty basic, to be honest. You wouldn't really tell too much of a difference from economy, aside from the fact that they do have some LMS amenities in here. And although space was tight, I did manage to get changed into the pyjamas. I'm not the biggest fan of the style of these, but they are very comfortable, so it was nice to have these to put on for the rest of the flight. And when I got back to my seat, it was time to check out the recline. This is all controlled by the dial to the side of you, and this seat I do find incredibly comfortable when it's in that slightly reclined position, where you can just kick your feet up, lie back, and maybe watch something. It wasn't too long after takeoff until we were given a drink service. I just went for another glass of the orange juice, and I was once again reassured that as soon as champagne was available, I'd be brought that instead. But I was more than happy with orange juice for now. And whilst I waited for breakfast, I decided to check out the in-flight entertainment options. BA do tend to have a really good selection of both films and TV shows, including box sets. I didn't find the control to be the most responsive here, but I've had worse, and the provided earphones are pretty good quality. They're very comfortable and they do a decent job of noise cancelling. But I did get a bit of a dodgy set on this flight. Only the right ear was working, not the left. I'm sure I could have probably asked for a replacement, but there wasn't too much I was too excited to watch on the flight. And as free Wi-Fi is provided, I did tend to stick to that instead. The table was set beautifully for breakfast. I started things off with a croissant and some fresh fruit. Not the most elaborate starter in the world, but it was all really nice and I had no issues finishing my plate. But I was really looking forward to seeing what the full English would be like, which was coming up next. And oh dear, didn't exactly fill me with excitement to look at this plate. It was all just looking a bit drab. As I said before, you'd expect out of all airlines that British Airways should be able to do a decent job of this, but it was a bit of a disappointment. I will say the sausage and bacon, in fairness, were absolutely fine, but the biggest issue is it just gave me a massive pile of eggs, and terrible quality eggs at that. I do generally have a rule that I won't eat eggs on a plane. I broke it here, I really shouldn't have done. And I didn't want to be wasteful, so I probably ended up eating way more than I should have done, but I did still end up having to leave quite a lot of it. There was just a massive pile of it. And as I was feeling a bit unsatisfied by all that, I decided to ask for something else, so I ordered the French toast to come out after this. There would be a bit of wait before that was ready, but in the meantime I heard a champagne cork pop in the galley, and the crew came straight out with my very full glass of champagne. Much better quality than the food that was on offer, and I'm pretty sure they did open that bottle just for me, as looking around the cabin everyone else seemed to be Saudi nationals who were either sleeping or not drinking. My French toast arrived and this was a significant improvement over the full English. Very nice quality with a good sauce going along with it, although I must admit I have had better French toast in both Qatar Airways First Class and Business Class on recent flights. So although it was nice, there was still that slight bit of disappointment that came with it. After the meal though, I just sat back, enjoyed my drink, while I was watching some entertainment on my tablet with the occasional glance out the window to check out where we were. And as soon as my champagne glass got even slightly low, the crew was straight over with the bottle to offer me a top up, but I decided instead to go for a glass of the Johnny Walker Blue label. And this was brought out alongside a few Lindor. I'm a big fan of the Johnny Walker Blue level, so even though it was still pretty early going, I just couldn't resist having a glass. And when I finished that, I decided to have another look at the menu to see what to get next. And there was another whiskey on there that I did want to have a try. So I'm going to try the Singleton Exotic Spice Grove single malt. That's good, that's good. At the risk of sounding like a bit of an alcoholic, drinking all these nice spirits is definitely one of the highlights of these first class flights for me. And I would kind of feel like I wasn't quite getting my money's worth without trying a few of them. The crew had offered quite a few times to set up the bed for me, and eventually I decided to take them up on that offer. It's a very comfortable bed and so much better than BA Business Class, but it's also not the widest first class bed out there. I was fortunate enough to fly both Emirates and Qatar A380 First Class within the same week as this flight, and both of those did have much wider beds when in a lie-flat position. That said, BA's is still very comfortable, and I'm sure I'd sleep very well on an overnight flight. Although I chose not to sleep on this one and just use it to lie down in a comfortable position whilst continuing to watch my shows. And whilst lying down, I did overhear a bit of an interesting conversation from the galley. Apparently back in premium economy, they were supposed to have 9 passengers, but they'd counted and there'd been 10 of them in there, so it looked like someone had decided to upgrade themselves from economy. I never did hear the follow-up to that though, and what the crew ended up doing about it. Just wanted to say a quick word about the crew. They'd been absolutely brilliant on this flight. very attentive and friendly throughout, often checking if there was anything else I needed or if I needed a top of drinks. You'd also get a bit of friendly chat, asking about travel plans, without ever being overbearing or anything. And they always referred to me by name throughout the flight. After lying down for quite a while, I decided it was time to perk myself up a bit, so when the crew did come back around asking if there's anything they can get me, I decided to go for an espresso. This was brought out along with some sugar cubes and a glass of water and definitely did the trick to wake me up a bit. So just under 2 hours left on the flight now. Just thought I'd give my overall thoughts. I do really enjoy this seat. I do think it's very comfortable. I've had some lovely drinks, some okay food, more food on the way. Interesting to see what they do with the Arabic meze. I'm very keen to compare that to what I get on Qatar and Emirates. So I think we'll be getting that very soon. Maybe another whiskey as well. We'll see. And then my Arabic meze starter arrived and oh dear. Look, it all tasted fine, but it's just a bit underwhelming. I mean, compare it to what I got on Emirates First Class a few days earlier, or even what you get in business class on Qatar Airways. Now obviously I would expect the Middle Eastern airlines to do it better, but I wasn't expecting the disparity to be quite that significant, and the business class offering shouldn't be beating first class. For my main course I went for the lamb tagine. Again, another one that's not bad at all, but not the most amazing quality either, definitely no wow factor to it. And it was especially disappointing considering how much I enjoyed my first class dining on my previous BA first class flights a few months earlier. Thankfully there was some redemption for the meal at the end though. This date cheesecake for dessert was absolutely delicious, so I managed to finish things on a bit of a high. Plus I was given another glass of the Johnny Walker Blue to enjoy the rest of the flight with. And there really wasn't much time left on the flight at all at that point, and just one last service item remaining, which was a hot towel, which I used nicely to freshen up before landing. So overall it's been a really good flight. Yeah, it's not going to win any awards for the dining, but seat comfort has been brilliant. I've had really great service from the crew, and for the price that I paid, incredible experience. But we're not done yet. Now it's time to get on the ground and go experience the Concorde Room. And with that, the flight was over, so it was time to make my way over to the lounge. Now the conventional thing to do here would be to go through flight connections. However, generally speaking, I do find that if you're travelling in first class, or if you've got BA Gold status, it can be quicker and easier to just go through arrivals, as you'll then be able to go through security at the first wing, rather than the standard security, which can have quite long queues. Even if you have fast track security at the normal security, it can take quite a while. And you tend to all just get lumped into the same queue when you go through security on connections. Plus, going this way, I get to show you that first class wing here at Heathrow. This is way over at the right hand side of the arrivals hall, and you're straight through. Security is incredibly quick here, and it also tends to be quite a bit more friendly than standard security. Once through security, you're deposited directly into the first class lounge. But this isn't where we'll be staying today. The first class lounge can be accessed by anyone with BA Gold status, and that's primarily who stays there, because right across the hall from here is the Concorde Room. This is exclusively for those travelling in first class or with Gold guest list level status. This makes it a much more quiet space with plenty of seating available. There's Concorde memorabilia dotted around, including a few bits and pieces in this cabinet, and even the nose of a Concorde in the terrace area. The biggest differences from the first class lounge is that here you'll find an abundance of different types of chairs, staff circulating to see if there's anything you need, and of course a la carte dining. I made my way straight over here to get myself some food, hoping that this would be a bit less disappointing than what I'd experienced on the flight. There's a really good menu available, plus on the drink side you've got some really nice champagnes, plus some red and white wines, but of course you could also order some cocktails from the bar. Since I'd already eaten quite a bit today, I elected to skip my starter and just went straight for the Concorde burger for my main. This was cooked perfectly, and whilst it's nothing fancy, it is very nice. Then left the dining area to find a quiet place to sit down and just watch some stuff on my tablet. I did make a brief pit stop over at the bar. Again, you've got the nice champagne, fancy spirits, and plenty of cocktails available from here, but today I just went for a cappuccino. I was definitely flagging a bit by this point, so I just needed something to wake myself up a bit. Even if you don't go up to the bar, there are people circulating asking if there's anything they can get you. Although one slight quirk I did notice is that rather than asking if there's anything they can get you, they do just say, "Are you good?" Which did throw me off a little at first. Well, after a fairly early start this morning and having a fair bit to drink on the flight, I'm definitely flagging a little bit. I was kind of in the mood for either a lie down or a shower. The lie down to relax, the shower to wake myself up, and thankfully there's something within the Concorde Room that lets me do both, and that's these private cabanas. So I don't have it for a huge amount of time. It's not quite like the private rooms in the Al Safra Lounge. I only have this for an hour and a half, but do you know what? That's plenty of time to have a lie down over here, get a shower, wake myself up, be ready to enjoy the lounge a bit more before my flight. So after a nice refreshing hour and a half in that private cabana, I made my way back out into the main lounge and decided to go have some more of the dining, but out on the terrace this time. I kept things relatively light, just going for a chicken Caesar salad. That was just off one of the starters, accompanying that with a Negroni from the bar, and then for dessert, I just couldn't resist the chocolate choux bun with salted caramel sauce. And with that, it was time to head off for my flight. Despite a few, I think, deserved criticisms I've given in this review, from some underwhelming food and some dirty seats, it was overall a fantastic travel day, and incredible value for money when you consider what I actually paid for it. I have been on a pretty good run of really cheap first class flights recently, so if you do want to see any of those other experiences, check out this playlist next.